I'm Gail Mabry, Acting Town Manager for the Town of Camp Verde. Thank you for taking the time to understand Proposition 476 and how it will impact the town. Let's step through this question and answer process together with the town's Finance Director, Mike Showers, and get some understanding on the ins and outs of Prop 476 and how it will impact Camp Verde. Why does the town have an expense limitation?
In 1980, the state enacted legislation that put expenditure limitations on the various cities and towns. Towns that incorporated after 1980 had their base limits set in relation to their surrounding communities' budgets at that time. Camp Verde's base expenditure limit was created when it incorporated in 1986 at just over $2 million.
What is the town's expense limitation this year?
The town's current expenditure limitation is $21 million.
How did it get to be $21 million if it started out as just over $2 million?
Each year there are factors that are applied to the base limitation amount. Those factors are based on population and inflation. Currently, the population factor is just over 2 and the inflation factor is just over 3. Those factors are multiplied by the base limit amount. That's how you arrive at the current expenditure limit for the year that we're in. What
happens if the town spends more than its expenditure limitation?
If we go over our current expense limitation, the state can take away up to 2/3 of our state revenues. Currently, the town receives about $6 million from the state of Arizona. That would be $4 million of revenues the town would lose.
If the town's current expense limitation is $21 million, how is the town budgeted to spend $58 million in a fiscal year?
Within the legislation for the limitation, there are exclusions from what types of expenses are applied to the limitation. For instance, any grants received don't count against the limitation. They're excluded from that calculation. Likewise, debt-funded purchases, payments for debt principal and interest, and a number of other items are also excluded.
What is the point of a limitation?
To stop cities and towns from potentially overspending their tax revenues. It really penalizes cities that are receiving revenues that are growing faster than the adjustment factors of the limitation allow for.
Would that just incentivize cities and towns to get more loans to cover purchases?
Yes, it would. And while debt works for a lot of projects that a city or town may do, for short-term projects and some of these smaller equipment purchases that we want to do with cash that we have on hand, it is just more costly and more inefficient for us to have to go out and get short-term debt to do that.
What if the town's expense limitation is increased? Won't the town just start spending more money?
Not necessarily. Camp Verde's budget policy is to have what is called a balanced budget every year, regardless of any reserves they have built up over time. So the town will not spend more than what it brings in for any given year on operations and service delivery.
What do you mean by operations and service delivery?
Operations and service related items would be things like wages, electricity, and office supplies.
What about capital expenses and one-time equipment purchases?
Those are the types of things that the town would like to spend some of these extra reserve monies on. But those are also the types of things that could wind up putting the town over that expenditure limitation.
So if the town only spends what it brings in for operations and the expenditure limit keeps going up, how would the town run into a problem with the expenditure limitation?
If the town's revenues grow faster than the inflation factors that are applied to that limit, what happens is the town will begin building reserves of funds that it can't spend. For instance, in 2021, after COVID, the town of Camp Verde had a 41% increase in its local tax revenues. That's the exact kind of thing that will bring a town much closer to its expenditure limitation, and that's what happened to Camp Verde.
Would Prop 476 increase taxes in any way for Camp Verde citizens?
No, this doesn't change taxes in any way for the town of Camp Verde.
Okay, I get it. You want to be able to spend money that you already have on hand, so how does Prop 476 work?
Prop 476 will increase the town's base expenditure amount by $950,000. That would take its base expenditure limit from $2.5 million to approximately $3.5 million. When you apply the annual adjustment factors population and inflation to that base amount, that will create the town's annual expense limit from that point forward.
I hope this answers most of the questions that our citizens will have about Prop 476. However, please also take the time to take a look at the town's webpage, which has further information. There's a banner right at the front of our webpage that links to Prop 476 and provides further information. And if you have further questions after you've reviewed that, go to the question and answer portion of that site and you'll be able to submit your questions online. Thank you for taking the time to further understand Prop 476, and don't forget to vote on primary election day, July 30th, 2024.